Jill, I believe that you're muted.
Okay, here we go.
Okay. All right.
Alrighty, welcome in everyone. I'm Jill Summerlot, the team leader, the operations team leader here at InSource, and I would like to welcome everyone in today. Before we get started, the tiny URL that is at the first link on our Zoom platform, you will see that you can click on that, and that will take you to our information for that we need for today. For those of you that are on the Facebook Live, please know that as soon as we get things situated, I will put that link out there for you as well. So if you'll just take a few minutes and do that. And while we're doing that, I would like to introduce my co-host today, and this is Lesa Paddack. And Lesa is going to introduce our special guest today. Lesa, take it away.
Thank you, Jill. And thank you all for everyone who's joined us today to learn about Indiana's attendance law. As Jill said, my name is Lesa Paddack. I'm Regional Director at InSource and Central Team Leader. And InSource is the Parent Training Center for Indiana, and we have been for 50 years. And so we assist families and individuals from birth all the way to 26. And we do thank you very much for joining us today. We hope that you'll also take part in our other events and visit our website at insource.org. Please take a moment to scan the QR code that you'll see today. Please sign in. Please fill out a training survey. We are state and federally funded, and it is a requirement that we measure and monitor and collect data on our services. And you'll also be able to print out a certificate and receive any resources that are linked to this training. Additionally, as we go along, please drop your questions in the chat, whether you're on Facebook Live or you're on our webinar, and we will, along the way, ask Stephan these questions, because this is a great opportunity to find out more about the attendance law for Indiana, what it is and what it is not. So please take a moment to do the training sign-in, the survey. These really mean a lot to us to be assured that we're providing good quality information and services. So at this point, I will stop sharing. You'll have an opportunity to fill out that QR code survey at another time, also at the end. And at this point, I will introduce Stephan Balko. Stephan is the student attendance officer at the Indiana Department of Education. And we are so fortunate to have him come and talk about the attendance law for Indiana, what it is and what it isn't. We've had many questions from families, schools, community stakeholders, and he was kind enough to come and speak and give a presentation. Remember, drop your questions in the chat box. I will be monitoring them on our webinar platform. Jill will be on our Facebook platform, and this is a great opportunity to ask those. So at this point, I will turn it over to you, Stephan. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. I'm very happy to be here. If you just give me 1 minute, I'm going to work on trying to get my screen shared here. And once I get this up, I won't be able to see myself anymore.
Absolutely. And Stephan, I'll just stop along the way. And if we have questions.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, let me. I'm not sure what's happening here. Sorry, it went away on me. It was working when we tested it.
That's all right. That has to do with technology. This is the way it goes. You don't even have to change platforms. Sometimes it doesn't work. You have it up. It is showing.
Wonderful. All right. Well,
it is not in. It's not in slide presentation form. If you wanted that, but that's up to you.
I was hoping it would be, and it's not.
It's not in slideshow. Now we do see it. We just see all of your slides, which is fine. That's not a problem. But in case you wanted to put it in slideshow mode,
it's just sharing in slideshow mode on my screen. So that's
okay.
Why don't we do this?
Yes, because that does show your presenter notes also, which is fine because we all know we use them for reference. but just wanted to let you know so that you could make a choice.
Yeah, let's try this a little differently here and see if we can do this. Is that any better?
That's where you're probably used to having it. Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Wonderful. Well, thank you so much. I'm glad we got that. Now we got that sorted out a little bit here. I am so happy to be here. We're going to go ahead and dive right in. I know that your time is valuable as well. Prior to becoming the state attendance officer, I worked in and around our safety team. And now that I am serving this capacity, I'm happy to see some familiar faces and continue the work of helping our students across the state. But before we really get started, I want to make sure that we recognize the work of my predecessor, Kathy Danieluk. She had been around for a very long time and was a depth of knowledge, and she is enjoying her retirement. And we're grateful for everything that she did. But with that said, we'll go ahead and get started now on what we're here to talk about today. Really, we're not going to be prescribing or recommending one specific attendance policy over another. Really, just going to serve as an update on the new legislation and a reminder of some of the resources that are available to help identify and address absenteeism, generally speaking. So today we'll cover a bulk of it. We'll be covering Senate Enrolled Act 482. We'll also cover a few other items as well. If you have any questions, please use the chat function and they'll get relayed in. We'll try to do our best to answer them as they come. If I know that it will cover it a little bit later, then I'll ask that we cover it then as well. I may not have every single answer today off the top of my head. That said, I will make sure that if I don't have it, that I get it, and I will make sure that Lesa gets it to get distributed out to everybody else as well. So that said, we will go ahead and dive right into our legislative update and talking a little bit about Senate Enrolled Act 482. What this bill really did was help to define excused and unexcused absences, and then also push for the creation of a list of best practices to help address and prevent chronic absenteeism and promote school attendance. So, really, I just kind of wanted to talk a little bit about what this bill is and what it is not, what it does and what it does not. I know that there has been some confusion on this, and so we'll try to do our best here to clean this up. So really first, right off the bat, um, it does not eliminate any local control when it comes to determining what is or is not an excused absence. That is still going to be defined locally within school policies. What it did do was ask that those excused absences are put into different categories so that we have a better understanding of why kids are absent, whether it's excused or unexcused, rather than just that they are. So moving beyond the tally mark of present or not present and moving into the why, so that we can help better direct those resources and develop those resources as well. Additionally, there are no penalties for excused absences under the state law. The state law really only requires the intervention and the referral to the prosecutor's office after those 10 unexcused absences. So that's where the truancy piece comes in. And that's where really the legal and judicial punitive measures start to come in there. Anything really beyond that will be determined locally. And as I mentioned before, schools are now required to report additional data regarding the types of excused absences that they're seeing from their kids as well. So on the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about habitual absences. These will require the governing body of each school corporation to have a policy outlining the conditions for excused and unexcused absences, and the policy must include the grounds for excused absences. Thinking about if you're going to require a doctor's note, or if you're going to allow a parent's call, or if there are a certain number of parent call-ins that you will allow until a doctor's note is required. You would want to spell that out within your policy, whatever you determine there. And then also any absence that results in a student not attending at least 180 days in a school year must be in accordance with that policy to qualify as an excused absence. So it's really important to take a look at your policies and make sure that they're aligning with these new attendance code descriptors as well. So taking a look at what we have now broadened for the excused absences, and you can take a look here, the excused medical. Again, there had been some confusion around whether or not a kid could make it to a doctor's office or for an orthodontist appointment, whatever it might be, without being considered truant. Those excused absences are still excused under Senate Enrolled Act 482. It's just going to be counted as an absence, but it is not going to be counted as the unexcused absence, which results in the truancy steps that follow. There's also the excuse for a death or funeral, excuse religious, excuse family planned, family unplanned, and administrator approved. What I did do was removed the excused absence, which is a general statement, and then also removed the tardy. So within your policy, you'll probably want to take a look at if a student misses, a certain number of periods. How does that add up to a half day or a full day in absence when you are tallying their attendance up? Some of the additional descriptors that you would see for attendance, exempt. These are the specific items that are spelled out in state code. They're the ones that you've seen before. They didn't really change. Thinking about serving as a page in the General Assembly, the State Fair, FFA, other educationally approved outside activities. Those are the ones that still fall within that exempt category. You would also have expelled, in attendance, suspended, unexcused, and virtual. And so really the big change is how we're categorizing those those excused absences into those categories that we had mentioned previously. So now moving beyond those excused absences and talking a little bit more about the unexcused, the habitually truant definition is really being absent from school for 10 or more days in a school year without it being excused or without being absent under a parental request filed with the school. And again, this is going to be how it relates to your local school policies on what is considered excused or unexcused, and making sure that if you are seeking an excused absence, that you're meeting the requirements under those policies, or that that student is meeting those requirements under that policy. When a student does become habitually truant for the 10 or more days in the school year, the responsibility is then for the schools to report a child's habitual truancy to that prosecuting attorney. So talking a little bit more about what does that referral look like? What are the steps that come into play there? So prior to that prosecuting attorney filing an affidavit, the attorney may do the following: conduct a meeting with the child, guardian, school officials, and service providers, collaborate with the parties to develop an intervention plan to address truancy and make reasonable efforts to secure those support services. Upon completion of this intervention plan and meeting, the prosecuting attorney could provide written notice to that child's parents summarizing that plan and that meeting. This is where schools will need to work closely with their prosecuting attorney's office to develop a plan. I know in some communities, the prosecuting attorney's office has worked with their juvenile probation team and their juvenile courts to really ramp up the identifying of those support services and to kind of take these meetings on full tilt. I know that other communities, the prosecutor's office might not have the same level of resources, and they work with the schools so that the schools can help provide and address some of these meetings in conjunction with that office, the attorney's office. So it could really look a little bit different in practice, but these are the steps that need to be taken prior to that affidavit being filed. Another note that's important here to note is that effective July 1 of this year, it is no longer allowed to suspend or expel a student solely because they're chronically absent or habitually truant. Um, so that just keep that in mind when you're thinking about your plans, your policies, and any discipline that might go along with that as well. So I'm going to pause here for just 1 second and stop sharing and see if there's any questions that we can address
There's
now.
not any right now on this platform, Stephen. I do think that clarification about not being able to suspend or expel due to tardies is a very important part because we did often see that.
And there hasn't been anything posted on our Facebook as of yet.
Wonderful. Well, I will continue right along, talk a little bit more about our data. So let me get my screen share going again here. And we will do this. So next, we're going to talk a little bit about the attendance data, how it can be used when used effectively, how you could use it as part of your overall absenteeism prevention plan, and where you can find some additional information to help support that as well. So really, when you're developing your attendance policy, thinking about the new categories and thinking about the supports that you provide and how are you going to identify and work to get those kids into their seats and into the classrooms, really having a deep understanding of how you can utilize your local data, how are you tracking it, and how can you rapidly respond to those attendance issues? How can you identify those kids that might be starting to display a pattern? How can you reach out to them and see if there is a specific need that they might have? So again, looking at setting specific thresholds for interventions that should be compliant with your local policy. What are you intervening with just the unexcused absences? Are you intervening with the excused? What's, is it following the state guidelines? Is it going to be meeting sooner? What are the specific reasons those kids aren't making it to class? Families can be invited by mail. Phone calls are made 1 to 2 days before the meeting to help confirm that. But really utilizing that local data, identifying those specific kids and or families that might be struggling to get their kids there, and coordinating with them to say, hey, what are those supports? What are those resources that you might need to get you there before it becomes extremely problematic, before you have a habitually truant kid who's missing that much school. Next, we have the attendance insights dashboard. This provides insights into the summary of student attendance by corporation, school, grade level, and date from the school year 2022 through the most recently completed school year. You could take a look at the percent excused versus unexcused. You could sort by date range. Takes a look at both absenteeism and truancy, as well as includes some demographic information in there as well. This is great. You could compare across school buildings, across school districts. It is a reflection of the data that schools submit, but it gives you a broader understanding, I think, of what's going on around the state and how you can compare. You might study it and realize that, hey, this school district has had some success. Maybe you're able to reach out to them and think, see what worked for them, and if it was something that you could implement locally as well. And so really when we're reporting this data and the impacts of the data and what we're looking at, really the participation rate for testing, pupil enrollment, state and federal accountability, membership. This is why we report the attendance data, and this is kind of where it goes and how it's used as well. And then here on this page, or excuse me, on this slide, you will see some resources that are available to you, the Knowledge Hub. And I have a link to that, I think, on a following slide as well. So you'll be able to have that. There's a lot of really good reporting guides that are in there with the definitions, descriptors, exit codes, all of those things that can help clarify some of the questions that might come up as we go. Um, Additionally, in there, there's a couple frequently asked questions documents and some other links that you could find useful as well when it comes to the data reporting, what we're calling things, what situations might apply. Examples being, there are resources for in there about how are we going to mark those kiddos who might be in a juvenile detention facility or might have long-term medical issues. Really, there's a lot of resources for all of that. Found within those FAQs. Do we have any questions on the data piece?
I don't have anything on Facebook Live.
I do not have any questions at this moment.
All right. Well, we're going to take a look on the next 2 or 3 slides here about a couple of different resources and tools that are available to you. I'm also going to click on these links and we'll navigate to a couple of the websites just so you can see maybe where to find some of that information within those sites as well. One of the first ones that's out there and just has a lot of resources is a nonprofit organization, Attendance Works. They do a lot of good stuff here. They have a lot of good resources that are available here, and you can see a lot of engagement tools. And so you can see through here how you can find a lot of different information on a lot of different topics as well. Again, we haven't necessarily perused every single data set or piece of information that's on there. So take a look at it, see how it applies to national level organization. So make sure that whatever you're taking a look at is also applicable to Indiana laws as well. But really, they do have a lot of tools to address the chronic absenteeism and truancy, looking at the differences between the two. A lot of research, a lot of resources, a lot of training, and a lot of resources to help you think about engagement across the board as well.
Stephen, we do have a couple of questions.
Okay.
So, and maybe you would be willing to share this presentation with us, and then people could email us and we could send it out. But one of the questions was we were hoping we could get a copy of that FAQ, which may just be on DOE's website. I didn't know, but that was
yes,
one.
But I can also make sure I email it to you after this, so it can be a little bit easier to find as well.
That
so
is great. And I am dropping my email address in the chat for anybody who wants a copy. The second question is a question that we at InSource are getting often. And of course, we do discuss the fact that schools have a policy of what's excused and not. They get to make that decision in general. But this question actually kind of sums up several of the questions we've been getting. For students with autism who attend ABA half day outside of the school district, and then school half day, does the half day at ABA count as an excused absence? Because as we know, many times in the past, schools have been willing to do that, and now perhaps they're going to look at that differently. And the next part of that question is, if a student is sick for more than 10 days, what kind of documentation does that family need to ensure they aren't violating the attendance policy? This is very important for those of us with kids who have weakened immune systems. We do know that. Kids that are medically fragile and have occasional hospital stays. And then I'm going to let you answer those two questions. And then there's still a third question in this wonderful group of questions here.
Okay, I'm going to take kind of all of them together because I think they're intertwined. For those kids that go to the ABA programs half day, there's really nothing that has changed in the law that would require that to be coded differently than ever had been in the past, whatever that district had been. It could still be under the excused in probably a number of categories in there as well. So I think that would be one that would be acceptable there as well. And then for those kids who might be missing a large number of days, um, really what we would take a look at is what does the policy say for when a doctor's note's required for those to be excused? I know so some schools may say, hey, after the fourth or fifth, mom and dad calling in saying there's an appointment, we're not going to require the doctor's note just to kind of support that the kid is seeking treatment or is going to a doctor or is attending that, and then that would continue for those excused absences as well. If a student would be anticipated to miss more than 20 days, then we can get a doctor's note saying they're going to miss that extended period of time, and we can work to set up homebound instruction, virtual instruction. What's that going to look like for that student who needs it, and really go from there. There's not been anything within how we're classifying and distributing these excused absences into new categories that would require them to change how that would be counted from, say, last year.
Okay. Because, and then there's still one more question in this great group of questions, because
Okay.
I know that reading through the material, it talks about just a physician's note or statement. Some schools still have a letter of incapacity, right? Some of those things. So in general, I know that may be a little hard to speak to, but I think many parents do wonder if um, just simple documentation from the physician about the length of absence is sufficient. Does there need to be a particular form for that?
There is not a state form for that. It can be a physician's note. Typically, you would see, the duration and then maybe any potential accommodations that can be useful to that student while they're, trying to get their education from somewhere other than the brick and mortar building.
Okay. And then the last question in this is also, are the 10 days habitually truant, consecutive, or cumulative?
For the referral, so to be considered habitually true, that would be a cumulative 10 unexcused days, not consecutive. So it'd be 10 over the course of the school year. Did I understand that correctly?
That is, and thank you so
Okay.
much for those great questions and for answering those. I think those are all of those are very common questions that we are getting here at InSource.
Before we move on, Lisa, Sherry Moore, you have your hand up, and on the platform for today, we will not be unmuting anyone. So if you would please put your question in the chat box, that would be helpful. If you would do that, it would be greatly appreciated. Thank you.
Okay, Stephen, I think we've answered the questions we've come in so far. Please feel free to put them in the chat box. We're watching. This is a great opportunity. Okay, Stephen, we'll turn it back over to you while we're watching for questions.
Awesome. Thank you. The next site that we'll take a look at comes to us from the U.S. Department of Education, and it's their supporting student attendance and engagement site. And we'll follow that link here just one moment. But this has a lot of information on grants that are available to help support student attendance efforts, both formula and discretionary grants. And then there's also a lot of technical assistance resources that are there to help support student attendance and engagement. So we'll click on this here real quick and see if that's going to open the way I hope. Yep. So there they have the federal definition, and then as you scroll down on this site, you can see a little sooner than halfway down, you start to see a lot of the formula grants that will be there to help support attendance, and you'll want to just click on those to follow those, and you can learn a little bit more about what they are, when they're from, when the application windows are, and how they're going there as well. I would keep an eye on those as you're applying. I know that the status of some of the federal grants has gone back and forth a little bit. So just something to keep an eye on with those as well. The next section would be some additional discretionary grants to support student attendance. We won't click on each one of those, and I'll let you kind of take a look at that with your time as well. And then as you go on, there's technical assistance resources and centers as well, and all the way down. So this website has a wealth of information. So as you're taking a look at, what are those things that are um, going to help support what we have in our policies, and what are we going to do to help support our kids? So you can kind of really build that policy locally, taking a look at some of those best practices from the sites and seeing what will work and how you're going to engage your families and your kids, and how you're going to drive a lot of that discussion by looking at your local data and what your needs are, and then taking a look at maybe some of those best practices that are there as well.
Stephen, also, as you talk
Yes.
about family engagement, I just dropped InSource received a federal family engagement grant. I just dropped that information about what we're doing for family engagement in the chat. And you're right. All of this family engagement hopefully brings about better attendance because there's better communication and involvement between school and families.
Absolutely. I think the involvement, the knowing each other helps build trust when it comes to leaving your kids at school and knowing that they're going to be okay there, and that the school can help support those kids. So um, yeah, as much as we can engage and communicate, I think the better off we'll be. So kind of here lastly on our resources page that we have here, wanted to just take you to a couple of the DOE sites as well. So first we have our state attendance officer website, excuse me. And here are a couple of those FAQ documents that we had referenced earlier. They're kind of the basic high level, but these are the ones that we see a lot of. Even outside of the new legislative changes, just thinking about general attendance questions and enrollment and documentation that's needed. But it kind of helps inform a lot of these other conversations as well. So there is an FAQ there as well. There's a couple of memos that we have specifically attached here that apply really to everyone as well. And then as you go down, you can see there's a lot of different memos, a lot of different guidance documents. If you do have a Moodle login, and I can log in here just real quickly, you will be able to see a lot of additional resources that are here on this Moodle community as well. And as you scroll down, you can start to see what some of that looks like. And these are updated regularly. If you see one that has a year that might be, a couple of years out of date or appear to be out of date, that's because the statute hasn't changed and the relevant information hasn't changed. When it does, we review it and we update it in here as well. And then here is the Knowledge Hub. And this is one of, I think, the more useful sites when it comes to taking a look at attendance and the descriptors. So we had talked at the beginning of the presentation about the categories, and I think, a screenshot of this on here as well. But this is where you can access that anytime to take a look at it. But it also has the additional details from some of those categories that we didn't cover in depth because they weren't the ones that changed. But you can still see here what has how that compares, and you can see what was struck from those descriptors and those categories as well. And then let me see. And then you can come here and there's another page about how to report various student attendance. And I think this is where we get a lot of answers to a lot of questions here as well. So you might have a question about a student who's got extended time out or away from school. And you can kind of see the descriptor there for why that might be. Uh, and again, you can kind of go through and see what some of those different categories are. And this is sort of a lot of the questions that we get, a lot of the questions that we hear on webinars such as these. Um, and so as you scroll through here, you can start to see the different ways that students can be reported, have their attendance reported as well. And then as you scroll through, there's just a lot of different different resources here that are really good deadlines for the reporting info, accountability. And so you can really start to see that there really are a great number of resources that are available to help you out as you're starting to think about implementing your policies and creating them, and really thinking beyond the tallying of attendance on whether a student is present or not. Starting to understand, well, if they're not here, where are they? Is an absence an absence an absence, whether it's excused or unexcused, but we're counting it differently. But we don't have a kid in the school, so we got to be able to make sure that if a kid isn't there, we're knowing why they aren't there and how we can support them. That doesn't necessarily mean that every kid who is absent is truant or is going to be have a punitive action for it, but it helps us to identify and track where those kids are, where they're going, so that we can help better craft our resources, our supports, and have a better understanding of what our data is actually showing, rather than just present or not. I will open it up to questions. That's really a bulk of the information that I have. I know that everybody has a lot of different questions based on their experiences and what they're seeing in their communities and what they're seeing from their families and how different doctors' offices are interpreting things and the conversations are going around and around. So if I didn't address something specific, or it might not be appropriate for a bigger audience, then that's my direct information, and you can reach out to me there. And I will stop sharing my slides, but I am going to stay here and answer any questions that have come up.
Well, we do have another question.
Okay.
Does the funding change for the school if a student attends part-time instead of full-time? And is the attendance of that student connected to the funding? So some funding questions having to do with attendance.
I don't want to answer that incorrectly. There's a couple different ones there.
Okay.
So I'm going to get you an answer from, I'm going to run it past the
Okay.
folks to make sure I have the correct understanding of that and how that calculation works. But I can get that to you, Lisa, and then we can go from there.
Great. Thank you. Well, as we're waiting to see if more questions come in, and Jill may have some, I think what you were talking about before, and I've seen schools reaching out to try to meet the needs, right, of students. And why are they absent? Do they need some conversation around transportation or about some physical issue or care that they might need? Or is there, a problem with getting up and getting out of the house? And I think schools have asked some new questions about that. I've also seen schools really be willing to provide some tangible help, right? Things that they might need. Clean clothes, right? A place to wash their clothes, food, a variety of things. So we also, so someone asked, and you did just put your information in the chat. I have seen how schools have gotten care closets. They've gotten places where students can have wash their clothes. It's looking at how do we help get this student to school today, right? Along with talking about that trust issue that, because if you don't feel trusting, it's hard to have your child there, and that communication. Jill, do you have any questions?
No, I haven't had any posted on our Facebook Live, but I would just like to remind everybody, this is a great time to ask any questions that you have. We don't always get an opportunity for somebody to be here that we can do this and ask direct questions to. So please take the opportunity, whether you be on our Facebook Live platform or you are on our Zoom platform. So now would be the time to ask those questions.
Stephen, while we're waiting for any questions that might come up, I want to thank you for coming and talking about this, because we get a lot of calls about attendance, and families have lots of concerns and schools have lots of concerns. And it seems like after COVID, there has just continued to be some additional concern and need. And part of it is additionally having that conversation about when you're not at school, you can't learn, right? That necessary information. And as we're working toward diplomas and learning builds upon learning, it's important to try to address those barriers that there are for a student to get to school. And as the state attendance officer, we just appreciate you coming today to speak to the issues. I do not have any other questions in our webinar platform.
I have a question, and then this is just because when my kids went to school and when I went to school, God only knows it was that long ago. um, there was a certain amount of days that you could miss and not get into trouble. And so, those days have gone by the wayside. But we know that, with we learned a lot with COVID and, attendance through it. And so, is there anything that you maybe see on the horizon, or anything that maybe we should be aware of that um, could cause the attendance to change, or anything, and I know you can't predict anything, but I just was wondering, because it's uh, just kind of, it's just hard, because everything seems to be changing so much. And we do have somebody that did put a question out there. It says, can a school tell a parent that a child cannot attend ABA half day and still be enrolled in school?
That second question, I'm gonna wading into legal water, so I'll get an answer on that one.
Okay.
About whether they can or cannot prescribe that. I want to make sure I'm careful on that one. As far as what's on the horizon, I think right now we're actually doing a really good job of setting ourselves up to begin to answer that question. I think with what we talked about today with Senate Enrolled Act 482 and starting to see, okay, yes, we have these excused absences. They're all still excused as they were before, but we're going to start saying, okay, is this medical? Is this family planned? Is it unplanned? Why are we missing school in those excused absences? Why are we getting the notes? Why are they getting called in? And I think as we start to collect that data and we start to see what's causing our kids to not be in school, what are those reasons, then I think we'll start to see maybe what are those changes that are going to be on the horizon and what does that look like. Obviously, we can't predict what's going to come out of the General Assembly. We can't predict the national trends. We just don't know a lot of that yet. But I think as far as what's going on within our borders, we're going to start seeing that data get a lot more clear, and then we'll be able to start kind of making those determinations from there. So now that's an answer without an answer, but I think we're knocking on the door of some really good stuff.
Right. Well, and so I also had another question. We have a lot of foster parents, and we know that the kids move. It's not unusual for a foster kid to be moved, several times in a school year. And so my question is, how does that attendance affect them? Because, they can miss 10 days at one school and then move to the other school and they're missing 10 days there. Or, how does that affect, and how do we know, other than the records, unless somebody does a dive into the records? is that going to affect them? I
You
use
know,
10 days just as a number.
yeah, no, and I think that's a good question. In an ideal world, that students' record travels seamlessly with them from school to school. Um, I know that doesn't always happen, so that would be just sort of I don't want to call it cumulative, but cumulative across office. A kid's in, we'll say, 3 elementary schools in a school year. Um, that record should track. We're able to watch that kid track on our end across those schools and how they're transferred and enrolled. So in an ideal world, the count should just stay the same, and it would roll over with that kid and get loaded into the SIS and go from there.
We do have a few questions. And then when we're done with these, I have a general attendance policy question. So one, which again, may be one that you can't speak to, but can you at all speak to how schools would code for a student who's a half day due to ABA, attending an ABA center?
Yeah, so that could be, within your policy, if you're going to take a look at it, it could be um, excused medical, it could be excused administrator approved. It would not fall under the exempt category because it doesn't meet one of those 6 ones. But I do think that there are a couple of categories within there that would meet that excused mark for them to be able to do that. And again, the excused absences don't result in that truancy referral. That's only those unexcused absences.
Okay, great. Thank you. Let's see, would incapacity letters still help school be aware of what's going on? So we talked about, we used to see those years ago. Now we've moved more toward documentation of just physicians. So children that have autism, have the sleep issues, extreme environmental issues. When we're looking at maybe I think schools being concerned that they've got the right documentation. So when you speak to what is required, again, there's not a state form. It is, and maybe you want to speak to that again, it is simply the documentation from the physician's note about this situation. Is
Right.
that correct? Okay.
That's correct. Yeah. So there's not an official letter slash certificate of incapacity that is, issued by DOE for schools or family to start that process. That does not exist. What we ask is that if that student is expected or anticipated that they could miss that 20-day mark,
Mhm.
that's when that note is going to be required to get them the additional services they need. It sounds like with the question that came in about causing the sleep and adding up
Mhm.
and how those, if you're missing, 2 periods or a period every
Mhm.
morning, that might add up to a full day after you've
Mhm.
hit, 6 periods, right? And so you could start to do that calculation within that to say, hey, if this kid's going to miss this many days, here's what we're going to do to help support that. And so thinking about it that way, um, that's really where that certificate comes in on that 20 days. Now, you could always work with your schools and your counselors and your teams there to say, hey, while we might not reach that 20-day mark, here's what's going on with our kid. Here's what's going on. Here's what those needs are, and work within your policy in your school district to come up with a specific plan for that. But really, that certificate or that letter from the doctor's note is to help drive those services for those kids who are going to miss that 20+ day mark.
Okay. So
That's not
then
to say it can't be used for
right.
fewer locally, but that's when it becomes prudent.
So that information needs to just basically say this student would be missing 20 instructional days due to medically fragile or whatever. Okay.
Whatever
And
that might
explain what.
might be
Right.
for that
Okay.
kid's specific situation.
Okay. We have another question. If we get consistent feedback about a particular school system that seems to be giving incorrect information on the attendance policy, should we direct them to the administration of the school or social workers? Should we reach out in advocacy for our families? So someone who's assisting families. Just your thoughts on this coming up in their office. They'd like to know. Sometimes we do set at meetings, I'll be honest, Stephen, where school is saying, Johnny missed X amount of days and parents disagreeing. And I know you can only speak in generalities as far as that, but let's just say, if a family is in disagreement, because I know that generally speaking, there's like a letter that goes out, like at day
Mhm.
5 or 7. Um, and it says, hey, your child's missed. We also send families to the school website to read their policies. But if a family is in disagreement with how many days have been missed, do you have something that maybe you could speak to that concern?
Yeah, so those are going to be just kind of inherently unique, I think, situations that arise. Like obviously trying to resolve that issue locally with the school administration, I think is usually the best route. Um, we also myself we take a lot of these calls to kind of help mediate some of those, because I think where you run into trouble sometimes is that there are misunderstandings of the legal interpretations of the laws, and it's not necessarily a dispute on was this letter sent on day 5 or day 6. It's more of no, we have legal settlement here, we want to enroll. The school say no, we don't believe you do. And so we address all of those types of issues. So if it becomes an issue that can't be resolved really locally with the school administration, please feel free to reach out to me or have those families reach out to me. We take calls from parents and guardians all day, every day, and help to resolve these types of issues. Sometimes the family has a misunderstanding of which law applies and how it applies. Sometimes it's the school. Um, Sometimes both are right or both are wrong, and we try to resolve somewhere in the middle and make sure everybody's compliant with the law, and that our goal is to keep kids in school and get them in the classroom. And so that's really what we try to do there. So if you can't resolve it with the school administrator, you can send them my way.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm.
Additionally, someone added, we have a lot of students that can't get to school because of anxiety. Then sometimes
Mhm.
we look at an IEP or a 504. So they commented on the book, The Anxious Generation, about mental
Mhm.
health considerations.
Yeah.
And then, of course, we do then talk to that family or that school about an evaluation for special ed services sometimes, in order
Mhm.
to take a look to see if they would qualify. So I would say that over the 20 years I've been doing this, um, there's been a significant increase in students who aren't able to get into the building, right? And then maybe you have something to speak to that about. But what we're seeing is that discussion about IEPs or services or changes or homebound services or virtual services. So someone did comment on that, mental health issues that have increased.
Yeah. And
And Lisa, we have a question about that on our Facebook Live. It says, can students be excused for mental health reasons? Family has gone through something and parents keep children at home.
Yeah, so there is a section. Uh, Probably ought to jump right back into the slide real simply here, but I can pull it up. There is a code, an attendance code that you can use that is excused family unplanned, and that would include that kind of unplanned family event, emergency, those types of things as well. So that could be that one, or it can fall under the administrator approved, depending on that conversation that you're having with the school as well. But there is an avenue that would again fall under what is the local school district's policy, though. But it could be depending on how that policy is crafted.
And then there is another statement just saying that this person has concerns that the schools might be seeing an uptick in the number of students with profound autism coming in due to some of the Medicaid and ABA funding challenges. So there are lots of different barriers sometimes of getting a student in for that learning, and the things that the school does to support and the things that the family does to support are all part of that conversation. I do not have any other questions.
I don't have any that's been posted on my end either. I just want to thank you, Stephen, for being here today and putting to rest some of those things that people have heard about the new attendance law, the things that have come up, and so this really does um, debunk all of those things. So thank you so much for being here and explaining that to us. I greatly appreciate it.
Thank you for having me, and I'm happy to meet with anybody individually or schools individually or whoever it may be, and talk about this or any specific issues that you might have.
Stephen, before we go, I'd like to just take one moment to go back to what is kind of each school district makes their policy. But in a typical situation, um, would a family be expecting to like get something like a warning letter at day 5, a more um, stern or involved letter at day 7? Could you speak just to the typical thing that a family might receive if their student is having unexcused absences or maybe
Yeah, so you
excused?
So there'll be a parent meeting that is within code there that says, hey, after 5 in that 10-day, that rolling 10-day window, we're going to reach out to parents to schedule the meetings and have those family meetings. So that's really where that
Okay.
is. Moving forward and beyond that, or before that, earlier is going to be school dependent. That's the intervention that is spelled out in code there. I would say typically you'll see that, at 3, 5, 7, maybe what with that 5 being there, another letter, another meeting at 7 days, and then 10 is, obviously where the next thing goes. But yeah, that's where that would fall kind of typically.
Well, Jill, I have no more questions on my side.
Okay. So I am going to bring back up our QR code.
We do have thank you, Stephen, and we do want to thank you all as Jill's bringing up the code. Um, it is Jill Summerlot and Lesa Paddack from InSource, which is Indiana's Parent Training and Information Center. We are here to help families understand that special education process from birth to 26. And today we're with Stephan Balko, State Attendance Officer for IDOE, Indiana Department of Education. And we want to thank him for coming today to talk about the attendance law, about what things are excused possibly and not, and helping families understand that they need to know um, what their school attendance policies are. So again, if you will please scan the QR code if you have not, do the training survey, sign in, do the survey, whether you're watching at a later date or you're watching now. We are state and federally funded, so we are required to collect data on our trainings, and we want to make sure that we are always having quality material for our families. And Stephen, you certainly filled us in on many things today. So thank you all for joining us very much. And Jill, I'll turn it back over to you.
Well, and I want to remind everyone that Stephen will be sending Lesa the PowerPoint. And so she has put her email address in on our Zoom platform. And I had a request for that on our Facebook Live. So I've dropped Lisa's email address, and Stephen will send that to Lesa. And then if you will email Lesa, she will be happy to send that out whenever she gets that from Stephen. So at this time, I want to thank everyone for being here today. Please know that we greatly appreciate your support. Please remember to fill out that QR code and follow that information. If you have any further questions, you are more than welcome to reach out to Lesa or I. Stephen has been so gracious and so given us his contact information, and I've posted that on both platforms. So at this time, I don't have any more questions. And Lesa, I don't see any that's come up on your side.
I will go ahead since they won't be able to access from the YouTube the chat. My email is lpaddack, Paddack, at insource.org. And you can always find Jill's information and mine on our website at insource.org. And you
Yes.
can find Stephen's on the DOE website. Thank you all very much. We've had no other questions come up. Thank you for joining us today.
And I just thank you for everyone for being here today. Please thank Stephen for being here, and Lesa, my co-host, as usual. You're marvelous. Join me on Monday for Monday Minutes, and we will continue on with our parent-to-parent guide. And I will see everyone then. Have a great rest of your week, everyone. And again, Stephen, thank you. And Lesa, thank you for being here.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
great afternoon.